You're listening to the Ball Truth Sports Show. My name is Terry Waldrop. The old bald coach nailed it through the uprights a couple times last weekend, folks, which is a lot better than some. We correctly got Alabama going into Kyle Field and taking care of Johnny Football. We also correctly predict the ULM defrocking of the Demon Deacons out on the East Coast. We missed big time on Texas and Ole Miss. Who would have thought that Johnny Reb could go in and spit roast bevo in his own pasture? Things just went from bad to thermonuclear for Mac Brown and company in Austin. Let's get started with this week's hair-raising picks and jabs. Let's start with ULM at Baylor. The Hawks' test this week is considerably more stressful as they fly into Waco to face a bunch of Baylor Bears who barely made it out of Monroe last year with their hides intact. This year's Baylor team looks to be considerably better than last year's. The Bears are suddenly smelling a wide-open Big 12 race, and the delusions of Big 12 supremacy will not be slowed down by a determined but albeit outgunned bunch of Warhawks. As much as I hate to do it this week, I don't think the Hawks get to add a Big 12 scalp to their growing collection of hair pieces. Baylor 42, ULM 21. Auburn at number 6, LSU. After the last 2 weeks' inter-squad games, Les Miles-led Bengal Tigers will host the Auburn Plainsmen, War Eagles, Tigers, or whatever you want to call them, in Death Valley to start Southeastern Conference play. The Auburn faithful desperately want to believe in the Gus Bus of the new Auburn head football coach after 2 miserable seasons that seem decades removed from Cam Newton-led national championship Auburn team. I watched some of the Mississippi State-Auburn game last week. It was hard to watch. They should have given both team losses and refunded the fans' ticket prices. It was bad football. Mississippi State did a great job coming from ahead to lose to an Auburn team that's not quite ready to contend in the West with the big boys. The War Eagle did snap that 2-year-long SEC losing streak. The bad news, though, the Gus Bus is going to get tiger jacked in Baton Rouge Saturday night. They don't call it Death Valley because it's pleasant. Auburn had better bring their Plainsmen, the War Eagles, Tigers, whatever they're calling themselves, because the Tigers of LSU seem to have a bit of chip on their shoulders after being disrespected by the pundits in the polls early on and relegated to 3rd or 4th place in the loaded SEC West. The Tigers have an impressive offensive attack thus far, and they've had a great balance between passing and the stable of running backs and are capable of explosively big numbers, something we haven't seen an LSU offense be able to do in quite a while. The defense is also getting much better. Auburn is the first SEC test, but it is a tune-up for the marquee LSU-Georgia game to be held next week in Athens. They're not going to catch LSU looking ahead for that one. LSU 42, Auburn 17. Let's go to Tennessee at number 19, Florida. After an embarrassing performance against the U, the Florida Gators have had an open date to think about it, and they're going to be ready to bounce back in the swamp against a Tennessee team who was taken to the woodshed early and often last week by the Ducks at Oregon. The only thing that was more garish than the score of the Ducks game was the neon yellow uniforms that would have been more at home on a SpongeBob SquarePants episode than on a football field. I'm anxious to see, however, how Volunteers bounce back after being humiliated in Nike World last weekend. Florida's still of a bit unknown, and their offensive woes so far has made LSU's offense the last 2 years look more like the New England Patriots. Bad news for Tennessee. Florida's got to get the ship righted. It has to get it righted this weekend because this is the only team that can happen against before the real SEC teams start rolling into Gainesville. This game could be closer than what most people think. I'm going to take the Swamp Lizards in a close one. Florida 21, Tennessee 17. SMU at number 10, Texas A&M. First of all, does anyone really think Texas A&M should be ranked 10th? I don't. They're better than just about everybody else in the top half of that bracket. At any rate, the Fighting Johnny Manziels will rebound in a big way, and the Ponies in North Dallas are just the ride they need to provide quite a bit of therapy after the red elements of Nick Saban and Alabama escaped Kyle Field last week. Don't look for Johnny Manziel and company to be nearly as sharp, and even you could expect to let down early, but the Aggies are too good, too deep, too talented, and they're just now starting to realize how good they really could be. The horses from SMU won't even make this a race for long. Call the meat wagon because these ponies are all used up. Texas A&M 62, SMU 28. Michigan State at number 22, Notre Dame. With Sparty rolling in at 3-0, the Irish are trying to squeak by another opponent before hosting Bob Stoops and Oklahoma next week. I've been tough on the Irish for how they win and basically who they play against. That hasn't changed, but I will give them credit for one thing. They're finding ways to win close games, albeit against mediocre teams usually, but they do tend to win. The Irish have the meat of their schedule coming up, and they're very much alive for a BCS-level bowl game if they can close the deal against some legitimate teams. Michigan State is no Illinois, but the Irish will find a pot of gold and take down Sparty by a count 28-21. Number 23, Arizona at number 5, Stanford. The Sun Devil was a recipient last week of one of the most egregious officiating crew judgments this side of the Olympic gymnastics from the old Soviet Union. The bizarre finish where the officiating crew allowed 17 seconds to run off the clock and not give Wisconsin the chance for a chip shot game-winning field goal had even conspiracy guru Alex Jones asking, "What's going on?" Seriously, what an incredibly bad break for the Badgers, who by virtue of a down league conceivably could have run the table and played for a national title. Not a good weekend by my striped-shirted friends. Enter Stanford, who along with the garish Neon Ducks have been the stalwart of the Pac-12 since Pete Carroll jumped his own sinking ship that was the USS Reggie Bush and USC and bolted to the NFL. Stanford's a solid team, well coached, and has been consistent for a while. Are they good enough to be worthy of a top 5 ranking? Good question. Does anyone think the Cardinal can play with Alabama, Texas A&M, LSU, Georgia, Clemson? I'm not sure they can play with Ohio State. Only those on the left coast or states where they have legalized marijuana do you find people that actually believe this fairy tale could be true. The Cardinals, in this game, will rise to the occasion and drop the Sun Devils handily and thus boost their chances to meet the SEC survivor and be this year's annual sacrifice in the BCS title game, or as folks in Dixie have come to call it, the SEC Invitational. Louisiana Tech at Kansas. After being fried by Rice, the Jayhawks of Kansas play host to a bunch of Bulldogs from Louisiana Tech who were unexpectedly swept at home by the Green Wave from Tulane. Kansas football is bad, but it's consistently bad. The good news for the Jayhawk fans is football gets closer to its midway point, it means it's closer for basketball season. That should bring a smile to your face. I feel from both my friends in Kansas and Kentucky who are ardent football fans. It's cruel and unusual punishment to watch these two attempt any sort of football program each year. Fans of both schools actually should qualify for group therapy and counseling under the new Obamacare laws. It may just help, well, at least till hoop season. Back to the game. Louisiana Tech is still trying to regain the magic from last year that saw them break into the top 25 for much of the year. Change coaches, lose some key guys, and the bite of the Bulldogs hasn't just been that ferocious this year. Still, Jayhawk is likely to taste like chicken to a win-starved bunch from Ruston. Louisiana Tech 24, Kansas 17. That's going to do it for this week's Pigskin Picks in the college ranks. The old ball coach is still trying to figure out how this podcast stuff works, not only with some picks, but also some other pertinent sports topics and opinions that we're going to start putting up. I do appreciate the emails and the comments you've made on our Facebook, Twitter, and the rest. You can shoot me an email at balltruthsports@gmail.com or just go on our Facebook site, Terry Waldrop or Balltruth, and check us out there. We also have a link up to the WordPress site where we expand written style on a variety of topics during the week. Until next time's hair-raising comments, this is Terry Waldrop with the Ball Truth Sports Show.